Hello, welcome to Psych 130 Z4, Psychology of Personal Growth. My name is Sarah Maroon, and I am the instructor for this course. As you know, it's the online version, and this is a condensed 7-week session as opposed to the full semester 14-week version. While the pace of the course will move quickly, if you follow my guidelines and due dates on the course schedule, you will have no problem keeping up with the pace of the course. This is just a brief introductory video to discuss some of the major themes and concepts that we will look at over the course of the next few weeks. So some of you might be asking yourselves, what might one study in a course called Personal Growth, especially given the personal nature of that study? So what the course is designed to do is to blend psychological theories and research with some very practical activities that will allow us to take that research and apply it and use it in our daily lives to help enhance those lives. So some of the major goals of the course include learning about human behavior. The simplest definition one could give for the study of psychology is to look at how our brains affect our behavior. We will learn strategies to increase our effectiveness in reaching our goals. We will investigate theories of psychology that surround habits and behaviors, and also explore some concepts around happiness and well-being. Then we'll take what we've learned and use activities to integrate some of these things into how we behave on a regular basis. You'll notice in the syllabus, I've included a quote from one of our famous philosophers from ancient Greece, Socrates. And one of his most famous quotes is, "The unexamined life is not worth living." Over the next 7 weeks, we will examine many aspects of our lives and see if we can find some commonalities among people and also some differences among people so that we can use those commonalities and differences to help inform the study of our own growth. The specific aspect of psychology that we will look at most closely in this course is called positive psychology, which is a subset of a larger aspect of psychology called humanistic psychology. For most of the 20th century, modern psychology focused on disease and disorder and mental illness and was really looking at how to take what was seen as behaviors and conditions that detracted from people's lives and how to develop behavioral strategies, drugs, and other therapies to help ameliorate those conditions and help people live more meaningful lives and to enhance their lives. Positive psychology has gained some momentum over the last 20 or 30 years and has switched from a model that focuses primarily on what we saw as disorder and disease to that of more optimal existence. What are the attributes of people who are living lives of contentment and lives of, for lack of a better term, happiness? So these researchers have been studying the lives of people who we see as accomplished, those who have been able to achieve their goals despite significant obstacles that might have been seen as barriers. To use the term from Abraham Maslow that some of you may be familiar with, they've studied people we consider to be self-actualized, those who have really reached their full potential as humans. So positive psychology has looked at those attributes and said, what can we learn from this body of research to help people live more effective lives. So initially, the thought of studying happiness was something that made researchers quite uncomfortable, as you might guess. There are many problems with studying an abstract concept such as happiness. So they've come up with a more comfortable term, and one they feel is more specific to the study, and that is subjective well-being. So if you look at this term, the word subjective really means something that is seen through the lens of a subject or a person. And so measurements of contentment, measurements of happiness have to be looked at through the lens of an individual perspective. And I've called it a hotly debated subject, especially in research, given all the complications that come about when we study an abstract concept such as happiness. And some questions that come up include, what makes us happy? What does it mean to be happy? Can we define it? It's very difficult to research something that you're not really sure about the definition. And once you define it, how might we measure it? Can we be truly happy? And what would that look like? These are all questions that plagued researchers in the beginning of this study of positive psychology. And as you'll see in a moment, they were able to come up with some pretty distinct measures in some categories that allowed those measurements to carry through among various cultures and allowed researchers to find strains and commonalities among those who we consider contented, happy. So pause this video and take a minute or two to write down those things that make you happy. I'll be asking you to post these in a forum over the next few days. We'll look at the research in just a moment, but let's take a look at some philosophical questions first. Is happiness, or subjective well-being, a constant or changing state? In other words, are we happy for a few moments? Are we happy for a few days? Or is it really a constant condition? And while you may not be perpetually happy every minute of every day, can you say, I'm a happy person? Can anyone say they're a happy person? Is happiness an emotion that we cannot control? Is it something that happens to us? Or is it an emotion we can change through our thinking? These are not easy questions, but they're important to think about as we move through this study. Through Chapter 1, you will find some interesting research categorizing aspects of our lives and how they affect happiness. What you'll find in Chapter 1 may surprise you in terms of the factors that research has shown are very important, somewhat important, and relatively unimportant to people's overall levels of happiness. So what are psychologists and sociologists measuring when they measure subjective well-being? They've come up with 4 main categories. The first includes positive emotions. So are people feeling joy? Are they feeling elation, contentment? Flow is a term that is used to describe that state of concentration and focus. Some of you who are athletes or writers or artists may find that when you're doing those activities you truly enjoy, the rest of the world tends to melt away and you're in a zone. And that is what researchers refer to as flow. And those are part of a group of emotions termed positive. The opposite end of the spectrum, we have emotions seen more negatively, such as fear, anger, sadness. And of course, we all experience the full range of emotions throughout a day or throughout our lives. But when you measure those emotions and whether most of your day or part of your day or how much of your day is spent on the positive end of the spectrum versus the negative end of the spectrum, we're able to come up with measurements of your positive or negative emotions. And that is one of the categories that researchers have used to measure happiness. The second category is a sense of meaning or purpose. Do the activities, events, situations you find yourself in on a regular basis, do they provide some sort of meaning and purpose in your life? Or, on the other hand, do you find yourself wondering if your regular activities have meaning? Do they have purpose? Do they add to your sense of contentment? The third category is positive relationships. Well, not all of our relationships can be blissful all of the time, whether they are familial, romantic, those of your friendships. We all have relationships that either enhance or detract from an optimal existence or a positive existence. And so weighing those relationships and seeing how those relationships contribute to our lives is an important measure of contentment and well-being. And lastly, do people have a sense of achievement or competency? Is someone able to develop skills and achieve the goals they have set for themselves? And that contributes to a sense of esteem, both self-esteem and other esteem. And that sense of accomplishment, that sense of achievement, can contribute to a sense of happiness. Some other major concepts that we will look at include theories of human development. These are physiological, psychological, emotional throughout our lives. What are the stages of development in childhood, in adolescence, early adulthood, middle age, older adulthood? And so we'll look at researchers and psychologists such as Erik Erikson and what he has found with regard to human development over the course of our lives. We'll also look at theories of change. How do we go about change? What are some obstacles that prevent us from making the changes that we would like to see? As I just mentioned, qualities and characteristics in relationships. How can we form, develop, and maintain relationships that really contribute to our a more positive environment for ourselves? Physical, psychological, and emotional health. How do we maintain and bring about health in these aspects? And lastly, societal factors. We don't live in a bubble. We don't live in a vacuum. And our environment contributes significantly to our behaviors, to our responses, and to our emotions. And so how does our environment affect us, and how can we interact with our environment in ways that are most effective? Some other major themes that we should keep in mind as we move throughout the course. This quote comes from a more Eastern-based philosopher, Confucius. "The gem cannot be polished without friction, nor man without trials." Growth and change, while critical for us, are often painful processes, or they can be. Anyone who has moved through a difficult obstacle or a difficult time in their lives may have experienced some suffering in that process. However, often through that suffering comes growth and change and um, a more a fuller existence. We will talk about esteem, both self-esteem and other esteem, and a concept called the locus of control, which will be important for us to keep in mind as we learn about theories throughout the course. A way to think about locus of control, we cannot always control situations. We can't control what happens to us all the time. We know that. But what we can control is our reaction to those events or those situations. And how we view our ability to respond to our environment is a critical component to gaining control over our behaviors, our actions, and becoming more effective. There's an example that I like to use in this class, and it comes from Nelson Mandela, who just recently passed away in December of 2013, so just over a year ago. For those of you who aren't familiar with Nelson Mandela, he was a leader in the anti-apartheid movement in South Africa for many, many years. Apartheid was a legalized segregation in South Africa based on race. And so Mandela was imprisoned for almost 3 decades, or 27 years, for his activism to try to break down those barriers of segregation. And so people asked him after he was freed how he must be angry and he must be filled with bitterness given his wrongful imprisonment. And the quote that I will leave you with is, he said, "As I walked out the door toward the gate that would lead to my freedom, I knew if I didn't leave my bitterness and hatred behind, I'd still be in prison." I think that's a powerful concept to think about how we can control our thoughts and control our emotions despite circumstances that are outside of our control. So that's just a brief introduction to the class. I'm looking forward to this course very much, and I hope you are as well. As I mentioned before, we will move quickly, but if you keep up with my guidelines and due dates, I don't think you'll have any trouble fulfilling the major tasks of the course. As I tell all my students, communication is the key, and so please don't hesitate to contact me if you have questions or you need further explanation. We are using a new course management system called Moodle Rooms. This is part of a pilot program of courses, and I think what you will find is that Moodle Rooms allows for a lot more features than our old course learning management system. Much more interactive, although there may be some a learning curve as we move through. And so if you have any problems, again, please don't hesitate to contact me. Thank you for listening, and as I said, I look forward to the course.